The average person here eats around 10 grams of salt a day. That is roughly double the daily limit recommended by the World Health Organization. Salt raises blood pressure, and high blood pressure quietly wears out a human heart over decades. Add to that another major stressor. For most of the 20th century, smoking rates in Japan sat among the absolute highest in the developed world. This chart compares the death rates from coronary heart disease across the developed world. Despite those massive risk factors, Japan sits right here at the very bottom, lower than France, lower than Italy, and far below Britain and the United States. To figure out why, researchers tracked Japanese families who immigrated to California and Hawaii. For the men who maintained a traditional Japanese lifestyle abroad, their rate of heart disease remained incredibly low, matching the men back home. But for the men who adopted an American way of living, the numbers violently diverged. They experienced heart disease rates 3 to 5 times higher. Same ancestry, same genetics. The protection was entirely environmental. Whatever protects Japanese hearts lives largely in the shape of the day rather than in the blood. I found 8 habits surfacing in the research, and while most look like ordinary choices, number 7 is the one that stopped me. It has nothing to do with food or exercise, and nobody in the wellness world will sell it to you. In places like America or Britain, eating fish is often treated as a conscious, healthy choice. You buy a piece of salmon on a Sunday to feel virtuous. At this table, fish is just breakfast. It sits next to rice, miso soup, and pickles. The Japan Public Health Center followed 41,000 adults for 11 years. Those who ate fish about 8 times a week had less than half the rate of confirmed heart attacks compared to those eating it just once a week. This frequency is doing the real work. You will also notice the meal arrives completely pre-portioned in small individual dishes. There is no large serving platter sitting in the middle of the table. By removing the physical pan to return to, you eliminate the psychological moment where you decide to take a second helping. Across a whole diet, researchers estimate this structural limit cuts out close to 500 excess calories a day. Then there is natto, a fermented soybean dish. Studies show that people eating the most of it have a 25% lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. The benefit comes strictly from the fermentation bacteria, not just the soy. And this sits within a broader pattern of sideways eating, consuming 6 or 7 different foods in tiny amounts. When no single food arrives in a large quantity, no single food gets to do systemic damage either. Finally, seaweed is shredded over salads or tucked into soup daily. For women eating it almost every day, the risk of ischemic heart disease, which restricts blood flow to the heart, drops by 44%. People are walking to the station, standing on the train, and climbing stairs to work. Because the environment is hostile to parking, the average citizen easily collects around 6,000 steps a day just by running basic errands. This graph tracks cardiovascular risk against daily step count. You can see the steepest part of the drop happens right here at the beginning. Moving from very low activity up to roughly 6,000 steps cuts the risk of cardiovascular disease by nearly 50%. Along the way, they hydrate with bitter, unsweetened green tea. Drinking 3 to 4 cups a day yields a 20 to 31% lower risk of cardiovascular death. Compare that to Western sweetened drinks, where every single daily serving drives your heart disease risk up by 15%. Kinetic health and hydration are literally engineered into the concrete. Movement is not an extra task on a to-do list. It is the unavoidable cost of getting to the grocery store. Walk past a local park at 6 in the morning, and you will see dozens of older adults doing synchronized stretches to a public radio broadcast. Nobody organized them. They show up because it is 6:30, and this is what happens at 6:30. The American Heart Association classifies loneliness and social isolation as severe medical risks. Being cut off from a community raises your risk of developing coronary heart disease by 29%, giving it the exact same biological weight as chronic anxiety or severe job strain. Look at this data from the Japan Gerontological Evaluation Study, which tracked 48,000 older adults. There is a clear, continuous survival benefit for activities that involve physical movement or interacting with other people. Solitary activities, like sitting alone reading a book, offer a completely flat line. They provide zero survival benefit. Belonging to just one community group drops the risk of losing physical independence by 17%. Small, unglamorous duties in neighborhood associations ensure that older citizens still feel needed and tightly anchored to a daily routine. When those Japanese families moved to California, their heart disease rates surged, even when their blood pressure and cholesterol didn't. Michael Marmot, who led that research decades ago, concluded that the difference was the social structure itself. To be perfectly fair, this dietary pattern is not flawless. Because of the heavy reliance on salty soy sauce and miso paste, Japan actually has the third highest stroke incidence among developed nations. The diet heavily protects the heart, but the sodium actively works against the brain. But look at how these 8 cardioprotective habits function. Not one of them requires strict discipline. Nobody in that park at dawn is using sheer willpower to fight arterial plaque. The healthy choice occurs simply because it is the path of least resistance. The protection is built into the architecture of an ordinary day. Stop relying on motivation to keep your heart healthy. Motivation fades. Instead, look for one small way to reorganize your physical environment so that the healthy choice quietly stops being a choice at all. If someone came to mind while you were watching this, perhaps someone who lives alone a bit more than they used to, it might mean something to them if you sent this video along. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.